everybody. Welcome to good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Raising Excellence, one of the most valuable parts of your day. My phone just turned off. I'm Deidre, the MC for today's adventure. This week we'll be continuing our self-discovery course. This is our last week dedicated to accountability. So we're going to be talking about our accountability results of self-parenting ourselves. I'd like to introduce our fabulous team. We have Agnieszka, our psychosomatic illuminator.
Hello, everybody, and isn't Deirdre doing a good job in being the MC for the first time? Give her a thumbs up.
Thank you. We have me, Deidre. We have Michael, community conductor. And
hello, everybody.
Freedom. Sorry. You go again. No, you said it.
Hello, everybody.
And
welcome to Raising Excellence.
Thank you. And we have Dennis, our freedom facilitator.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here with you.
Kudos to learning live, you guys. That's awesome.
Yeah. I think I did really good. It's all on my phone.
And we already have a thumbs up for you from our listeners. So aren't you awesome?
Oh, thanks, guys. Okay, so how do we start the discussions? How did you exercise? No, we start the discussion off with the fallacy of the week.
We could do that.
That was.
Yeah, would you like me to show that on the screen right now? So just 1 second. There we have the fallacy of the week on the screen. It is the appeal to the bandwagon. So the fallacy this week is, why don't you want to wear a party hat when everyone else is wearing it? So basically trying to force somebody to do something because everybody else is doing it. Do you guys have anything to say about the fallacy of the week while it's still on the screen?
Yeah, that sounds logical because, if a lot of people say one thing or do one thing, then it must always be right, isn't it?
That's what the little birds on the photo are telling us.
It can't be wrong if everybody else does it.
Thanks to the excellent
book. That's where the coronavirus comes into play, really. When everybody's going into hysteria and panic mode because the news has, over accentuated how many people have died from a very small number of people in regards to the total population of the planet, whereas hundreds of thousands of people are dying from other things. It does make one wonder if should be following into the bandwagon.
That's a fair example.
That is a fair example.
So what other bandwagons could we jump on?
Well, Eric is telling us that we should not be wearing a green party hat, and a better is a yellow party hat. So that's the peanut gallery, and other people are raising excellence. We're quite happy to have our listeners here with us today. But yeah, appeal to the bandwagon. I mean, that happens a lot. That happens in so many walks of life. It's kind of, how those. I remember when I first came to Canada and all the girls in my high school had the same purse. It was a mind something. And it was just like, how can you all have the same purse? Like, what is wrong with people? And they all were really proud of having the same purse.
It was stylish and in. I remember a similar case when I was about 12, 13 years, I started to be aware of how unimportant fashion, that stuff really is to me. Like when I observed, my other school comrades, like in the bus in the school, and they started to wear, I don't know, baseball hats, which wasn't really, it's like more like an American thing, I guess, that was in, or that was in the time. And then after they started to wear all those kind of, what was it, like football jackets with like football teams that, not soccer, like, which is common here, but like some football, like American football brand teams that nobody really knew about, and people didn't even know about football at all or had no relation. It was just cool and the in thing. And then it just felt really strange to me, like looking around me and having everybody in the same or in similar style jackets and outfits, and it's like it didn't really relate to me at all. So that was one of the first times I think I became really consciously aware of something, you know, that you could call bandwagon as well, and I didn't want to jump on it at all.
So the title for today is accountability as a result of effective self-parenting, and we have this appeal to the bandwagon fallacy. So how are we going to connect them?
That's kind of a good question, huh?
I know. Like if I'm in an organization and my authority, whoever's higher up on me, tells me to do something, but I know that it's the wrong thing to do. But everyone's like, no, well, that's, you know, they know better. They're more qualified. They're older. They have more experience, so they must be correct, even though that I know that I'm not correct. Going along with that, because everybody else is kind of pressuring me to do that. Would that be an example?
That's a good example.
That's not me being accountable.
That's a good example. And I think that every corporate lawsuit starts with a situation like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I just,
right?
I don't know. It just kind of popped into my head.
But I also think that, because I've been struggling, like I'm really big on self-parenting, and I've been struggling with my self-parenting lately because, you know, I'm self-employed and I can do whatever I want during the day. You know, I have all the toys, all the books, you know, I have all my stuff available to me all day long. It's so much easier to go to an office and be separated from your stuff for 8 hours, because then you don't have the, oh, I just need to like do the laundry or whatever. And I think that self-parenting really plays a big role in directing me as to what would be beneficial, not for like the next 5 minutes, but over like the next month. Like you could choose to spend, and that whole how we spend our time thing that really messed with my head too, because you could spend the next hour doing this, or you could spend the next hour actually creating your future.
I think it's a great fit, the theme for today and the fallacy of today, because if you really, you know, if you're talking about self-parenting, that means to look after yourself. At least that's how I really understand it. And if you hold yourself accountable to your own standards, then, you know, you wouldn't really have to jump on anybody else's standards or on anybody else's
bandwagon,
you know, bandwagons, outfits, or, you know, ways of living.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think that it's really people are very reliant on outside forces for parenting. I mean, after we turn 20 and we're parented by our physical parents, if we're lucky, I guess, then we move on to being parented by corporations, or parented by a doctor, or parented by the government. And there is a constant need for somebody to take care of us. And I think that when exploring autonomy and exploring self-reliance and exploring my own inner world, I think it's better to, like, you can still use all those services for your benefit, but you don't have to rely on them, or you don't have to feel like they're the only source of information. You know what I mean? You can do your own research. Does that make sense?
Well, I like what you said to me when I was in a situation. You're like, well, you are in an emergency situation. You need some emergency help. So that's what it's for. Don't feel guilty about that.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Oh, okay.
But if the organization you reach to in an emergency situation then decides that you have to, you know, I don't know, convert to Christianity in order to get their help, that's where you jump off the bandwagon and go to a different organization, right?
It's really a disconnect, right? Like in the end, it boils down to you know, you're not really standing in your own power and being disconnected from your true self if you feel the need to have to jump on somebody else's bandwagon. Because if you would be aware, you know, of your true power and stand in that, then, you know, what would be the need, you know, to dress or to behave like somebody else.
And no matter what the topic, I think my motto in life is do your own bloody research. Figure out your own shit. Yeah, you might have to look to somebody like a doctor for prescription, or historical documents to understand the history, but don't just repeat blindly what other people are saying and just pretend that that's the truth without actually verifying. Like, use it as guidepost, not as gospel. Does that make sense?
Yes, I like how you said guideposts.
Mm-hmm.
That took me a bit to figure that one out, but it is it kind of makes sense to me. It's more just that it's a very clear difference. Then one thing's kind of like, okay, yeah, this is kind of what it is, and I'm like going, okay, I will check on that. Whereas the other's going, no, this is what it is, so don't question me.
Yeah, and I think that the difference is like, for example, when you're making a recipe, right? You can just like somebody who's say a big fan of one particular cook might only look to that cook for a recipe for a thing, and then in that way they would maybe give their power away to somebody else. So like, I can only do the recipes by this one person, and doing research would be checking out different recipes and finding out how you want to make the dish. That's a very simple example, but there are many, it goes deeper from there.
To continue with that example.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead, Dennis.
It's like, you could research and do your own recipe, or maybe just by experience without ever looking at any recipe, you'll find out something, or maybe you even just in a moment have, that gut feeling that, okay, this could work with this and let me try it together. So it's really, your accountability is really your own standard, right, to yourself, because you don't have to live up to anybody else's standard, really. Like, if you don't have to prove to anybody that it's logical and that it has been proven that this recipe works. It's like, if you feel that that's the thing for you, then do it. But it's important to be aware and to set your own standards for yourself.
Yeah, to kind of hitch myself to that point, for example, parenting should be probably the most important role you play in your life. And unfortunately, the way that society has it, parenting is one of the, biggest burdens that nobody wants to do, and it's totally unrewarding. And there's, nobody really cares. You got, government provided childcare, and you shuffle your children around to different circumstances that other people are in charge of, essentially their education and everything else. Bad parenting is essentially what is encouraged, and that's the bandwagon. And that's not what you want. You want your children to be absolutely the best prepared as possible. And unfortunately, for most of our societies, and certainly a lot of our communities, we don't really value our children as being the future and preparing them as such. So like giving them the education so they don't make the same mistakes that the 50 other generations before them have made. I kind of feel like for example, old men are kind of like, sorted so that by the time that they're 60, 70, 80 years old, they're they're too cowardly to say anything about anything. They would rather just keep their mouth shut than like bring up a good point about something that they could have, that a lesson that they've learned, that someone that could, like their grandchild could use
excuse me,
to change their whole life, but instead they just kind of say, oh yeah, well, I was right. They fell into that same hole just like I did when I was 18.
That's because our society doesn't encourage that.
Yeah, I tend to find that it wasn't my experience, and my mum's experience, my family's experience has always been just like, no, do better. But I find some other parents are kind of just like, they don't want their kids to do better. They want their kids to be the same.
Average? Why? Maybe
they fear that their kids are going to be disappointed, and so I have no idea. I don't
know. I just think, when I think about the parents that sacrifice themselves, I think of you, how you carried those babies for 6 months attached to you and had no life because you wanted to make sure they had the best and most secure start ever. and that they were really like, feeling good for the first 6 months of their life, like the most formative time. And that's amazing. That's a huge sacrifice.
Yeah,
Arguably bigger
and
than giving birth.
It's a different life, though. It doesn't mean you don't have a life. It's a different life.
Yeah, but you know what
Yeah.
she did? She never put down the kid for 6 months, and she has 4 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So 4
Yeah,
times.
well,
Yeah, that's a huge
I
thing.
didn't hold them. Like, I had slings and
Oh yeah,
hats
she
and
didn't
stuff.
use
It was
her
so, like,
arms.
cleaned and
Yeah. But
yeah.
you know, Deidre, what you said there, the word that was on my mind when you actually spoke was to disappoint, and I feel that, you know, as a father and as a parent, and then also thinking about parenting myself, like it's our role to disappoint. You know, we have to disappoint our children. If you don't disappoint them, then you don't prepare them for the world, because that is part, you know, of the world we live in. And then does that then also mean that if you talk about self-parenting, that we have to disappoint ourselves at time, you know, not always pat ourselves on the shoulder, but also say, well, you really screwed up with that one, you know, like how are we going to do it better?
Yeah, I really like that, and to like feel okay with that. That like I disappointed myself, and not like kind of be hard on yourself. That's like a different level. That's like a lesson that I've been learning. And
So
it's
a
hard.
Periscope
Like, I'm going to
listener.
sit on that disappointment.
So a Periscope listener, Percival, says that the reason that the parents are not asking for more for their children is because they want them to have the same lives that they have. They want to be the parents of the children with the same lives, average. So that's a really good point, because they don't want their children to exceed them for whatever reason.
So then they're basically limiting their children's life experience. But I think the
Yeah.
role of parents should be to, you know, to amplify that. And you know, even for me, like as a teacher, as a coach, I'd say, like if I work with my, you know, capoeira students or so, it's like, wow, if they surpass myself, my own level, whether it's technical or in the music or whatever it is, then it's like, wow, that's something fantastic. It's like, I'm so happy, because that shows that I've been a good teacher, right? If my own students is, you know, surpassing my own level in some ways, then that's something, it speaks for the quality of me as a parent, as a teacher, right?
Hold on. Hey, Lisa, how are you?
I was gonna say,
We're
look,
live at the
guys,
moment. How are you?
we have a special guest on our live
We have a
show.
special guest. She's
Days early.
Hi, Lisa.
She said she was gonna be late, but she's early. So hi, Lisa. You may participate just the way you are.
Yeah, well, we're live right at the moment, but that is totally fine. I'm so
Exactly.
glad you're here. So
That's what happens when you give people that Zoom link.
Yeah, we've had a couple of people just kind of pop in. Hey.
Yeah,
Had a
it's all
chat.
good. It's all good.
Yeah.
We love it. I was going to talk about my dog. Because like the parenting thing, I think, like, I know it's just a dog, it's not a human being, but I don't have any other kids, so whatever. But even the things, like, you know, I was out yesterday for a walk and I was talking to another couple with a dog, they're friends, our little dogs. And so I said, yeah, you know, I don't buy dog food, I make it. And the lady kind of looked at me and she's like, well, what do you mean you make the dog food? And I said, oh, yeah, it's easy. It's cheap. It's, you know, probably I spend only a third for what I do for the dog food, but I know exactly what goes in there. And I gave her the exact recipe and she was like, that's so easy. And like never even thought, because the bandwagon is so prevalent in our society that she never even considered that throwing a chicken and some veggies in a broth will actually give your dog maybe better nutrition than whatever is in that weird stuff that makes my dog itchy.
From China.
Right?
I was going to connect to the generation thing that Mike, you mentioned earlier about older people, you know, shutting their mouth and not passing on some of their wisdom, which is, you know, wisdom stems from experience. So like the more life experience you have, you know, ideally we would wish that we would increase the wisdom that we have just by sheer, you know, being alive for a certain amount of time and by surpassing the lifetime of you know, the younger ones. And I feel that well, there's certain parties that really benefit from the fact, or that may even purposefully work towards dividing you know, not only people, but dividing especially one generation from the other generation. And then that is what came to my mind when you mentioned that, oh, you know, like older people who would have the experience and the wisdom to share with the younger ones and could give them a hint and could give them maybe some shortcuts on lives. And help to amplify their experience and help them to step into their true potential in life, they don't do it. And why is that, and who benefits from that? And it reminded me also of something I read. I think it was Polynesian tribal cultures, where it was, or maybe even still is, very common that in those ancient cultures, that the children would have been raised not by the parents or by the generation of the parents, but by the elders or by the grandparents' generation. So it was very, it was prevalent that children were born to, we would today say like very young parents, and they themselves wouldn't have much life experience. And the fact that the grandparents were taking care of, and were raising the children instead of the parents, it would give them all the wisdom and the experience of the grandparents generation, who would have been around more time and who could kind of advise them better and give them a better start in life, so to say, while the actual generation of the parents still had time to explore and had time to make their own experience. So I found that very interesting.
Yeah. So now Percival has a question, but I also wanted to give him kudos because he talks about John Taylor Gatto, which we are all a fan, or all of us are fans in Raising Excellence of John Taylor Gatto. And he talks about community, that Gatto, Percival mentioned that Gatto talks about community versus networks and how we lock old people in retirement homes and children in school. That's a really good point because we were mentioning that earlier, how the society is separated. But the question that Percival had for us was, how do we relate to our children as an average parent and an extraordinary child? So that goes to the parents in the group today, I suppose. I guess it could go to anybody. I'll just shut up now.
How do we relate to children as an average parent and an extraordinary child?
Well, yeah, because if we're not dumbing them down to our average level, how do we elevate our children?
Oh,
right.
Well, for me, it would be right away. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, knowing who they are individually. So I can't. So I have 4 children, so I have to talk 4 different ways. So that, and they're at different ages. So I have 13 to 5, different genders, and they are just uniquely different human beings. And so I have to tailor my conversations around them. Not to the, like my older one, it's less than like that because I can do it just for her personality, because we can hold conversations. She can understand different constructs, different concepts, quite complex things. Whereas I can't have that same conversation with my 5-year-old. She just won't get it. And so it has to be, that's how I feel like I raise extraordinary children, if that's the question. To make sure that I focus on who their uniqueness is. And then my hope is that they will foster that into adulthood, that to keep that understanding, finding about themselves, their uniqueness.
Dennis?
Nice. Those are good points. What came to my mind was to not have an agenda, to not have my agenda and push it onto them, because really and truly, do we know what our children came here for? Do we know, what they came here to experience? So if I have a mindset and a set agenda of, how they're supposed to do this and how they're supposed to
like you want them to be a lawyer and make big money and drive big cars. That's an example of agenda.
Yeah, then I'm putting them in a box, right? So to not put them in a box and to raise them, it's really, it's true, it's autonomous, it's free beings. I think that is the goal, and the best way to do that, I find, or so far I found, is that to focus on freeing myself. Because how could I pass on something that I don't myself have to somebody else? It would be, what good of a capoeira coach would I be if I don't know how to play capoeira myself? What could I teach others? So it's like, if I want them to be free and self-reliant and stand in their own power and like be joyful in life and discover who they truly are, which is an ongoing process, I would say, then I would have to lead by example. I would have to live that, and that for me, that might mean something totally different than for them, and I would want to make sure that they understand that, and that the path that I chose is not necessarily going to be theirs. But if you look at nature, like how are the young ones raised in a natural environment, like even like with animals, like our first business really is to protect them. That's the first thing, to protect them, to make sure that they're safe, to make sure that they survive. That's the first thing. And the other things, that goes a long way already. So what does that mean in our society for us as humans, to protect them from what and from whom?
From mind
from
control.
What is that? You
But
sound like a conspiracy theory.
But I think that I'm still looking at Percival's question, right? How do I relate to them as an average parent and an extraordinary child? And I think that first step would be to recognize that you're not average. Everybody's extraordinary in some way. And the only thing that makes us feel we're not extraordinary is society limiting our self-awareness.
So is this how you relate to children yourself? Like, you don't have to be a parent to be able to relate to children, to make sure that they're going to be, their experience with you is going to, keep moving them up.
It's basically like what
is that how you do that?
It's like what you said. Like, I don't believe I'm extraordinary necessarily, like I'm better than anybody else. I just don't think I'm ordinary. I am unique, and everybody's unique. And so I have a set of talents. I'm better at some things and I'm worse at some things than each one of you. And it's not the same thing for every person, right?
Yeah, there's no necessity really to compare yourself to anybody else in that sense. And if you take it right back to self-parenting, then what would that mean, to us, without having like physical children? Maybe right now, like, what does that mean?
Oh my gosh, so that means
parents?
The average me has to raise the extraordinary me. Right?
Aww.
I have to raise myself as an extraordinary child. Thanks.
I think I've got an important addition here, and that is the best way to learn is to teach. And so to encourage, that student teacher kind of concept to go back and forth between parent and child and parent, where they teach you and you teach them, and they learn both ways, to be the student and then to be the teacher. When they understand that, they will learn so much more, and you will learn so much.